I strongly reject the ad hominem attack. We could disagree on this, but you're not going to call me a book burner on TV.
Right. Well, the correlation between book burners and people that want the Ten Commandments is high. I can't tell you that you're one of them, but 80% of the book burners want to, there's a high correlation there. And you want to talk about fundamental American values, try the First Amendment.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you want to see a masterclass in how desperate the culture war has gotten, look no further than this absolute circus out of Louisiana. You have Democratic strategist James Carville completely losing his patience with conservative commentator Scott Jennings over a brand new mandate forcing the Ten Commandments into every single public school classroom. Jennings tries to hide behind Western civilization, while Carville calls it out for what it is, a massive performative stunt from politicians who couldn't care less that their state's education system is floating at the bottom of every national ranking. And just when you think it can't get any wilder, a Louisiana history teacher comes on to explain why educators are ready to push back against this blatant intimidation. Seriously, make sure you stick around for the second half of this, because when that teacher drops the reality check on how these lawmakers actually talk behind closed doors, it completely shatters any defense they had left. Before we dive in, drop a comment down below and let me know where you're watching from. Always love seeing how far this community reaches.
Today, Louisiana became the first state in the country to require the Ten Commandments be on display in every public school classroom, from kindergarten to state-funded universities, under a bill signed by Republican Governor Jeff Landry. Under the new state law, which will take effect in 2025, the commandments must be poster-sized and in a large, easily readable font. In a joint statement, civil liberties groups and other opponents, including Americans United for Separation of Church and State, say they'll file a lawsuit challenging the law, calling it bluntly unconstitutional. Joining us now, proud son of Louisiana, Democratic strategist James Carville, and CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings, who served in the George W. Bush administration. I should have said proud son of Carville, Louisiana. So, James, what do you make of this new law in your home state?
Well, I think given the storm season is coming up, we don't need the Ten Commandments, we need the Hail Mary. It would be, much more appropriate for what we face with here in Louisiana. I don't know which one they're going to put up. There's 10 different versions of the Ten Commandments, and our schools are so underfunded that I'm not sure half the kids even know how to read them. But it's one of the dumbest waste of time I've ever seen in my life.
The schools in Louisiana traditionally have ranked very low in the rankings of schools in America. It's gone up, I think. Pre-K through 12 has gone up a little bit in recent years, but not by much.
Governor Edwards, John Bell did a great job. I mean, he got us, off the bottom, but Governor Landry is intent on putting us back on the bottom, it seems like. But I'm serious. When I look at this storm season and this summer coming ahead, it's going to be a fundamentally different country come mid-October of this year. It's going to really be bad.
Scott, I mean, is this a violation of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, separation of church and state?
I don't know. I mean, maybe not. I mean, that's for courts to decide. I don't have a particular problem with this. If somebody wants to hang up a piece of paper in a schoolroom that says, hey, kids, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, and respect your parents, that doesn't bother me. I'm not out here crusading for it, and I certainly don't think public school teachers should be preachers, but, these are the fundamental tenets of Western civilization. They kind of underpin, our entire criminal justice system. And look, if they're part of a historical display, if they're hanging up there next to the Constitution, the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, I don't have a problem with it. I do think it's sort of amusing that there are people out here so enraged by this today who at the same time would love to use public schools and public libraries and other public facilities to distribute information that more matches their own agenda. So I think people are overreacting to this, and the courts are going to have to get involved and see what the interpretation of the laws are.
James, I mean, is there a difference between having a book in a library and something posted in every classroom from the Bible?
Well, look, this is book burner talking points. All right, these people want to burn books, take them out of libraries. You can't substitute reading, writing, and arithmetic with like I say, but the courts will have to flush this out. But there's a 1,000 founding documents.
Right, I mean, Kentucky had a similar law.
The problem is you got to have kids that can read them.
Right.
Yeah, who knows what this court will do, but believe me, it'll go right up to the legal system. But what I find fascinating is the book burners really want the Ten Commandments. Give me a break.
Scott, how much of this really is about the quality of public education in Louisiana? Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I worry about the quality of public education everywhere. I worry especially about it coming out of the pandemic when you have an epidemic of kids who have just disappeared. They can't find kids.
Right, but is
Carville
this really
right.
about the
They can't
quality
read,
of
they
public
can't do-
education, or is it about election year politics and trying to get another, so-called religious freedom case in front of the Supreme Court?
But I don't necessarily think teaching basic fundamental values of Western civilization is incongruent or in opposition to also having quality education in a school system. And if I might, I do respect the hell out of James Carville. He's a legend in our business and for people who do what I do. But you are not going to sit on this television tonight and call me a book burner. I do not believe in burning books.
Well,
I strongly believe in the First Amendment. I have no interest in restricting any information. And I strongly reject the ad hominem attack. We could disagree on this, but you're not going to call me a book burner on TV.
Right. Well, the correlation between book burners and people that want the Ten Commandments is high. I can't tell you that you're one of them, but 80% of the book burners want to, there's a high correlation there. And if you want to talk about fundamental American values, try the First Amendment. But that's me.
For the record, I will say I have not heard Scott Jennings talk about burning any books any time that I've talked to him. So.
There's a lot of book burners that want this.
I hear what you're saying, James.
This right here is where everything falls apart. Because when James Carville said this, but it is one of the dumbest waste of time I have ever seen in my life, he exposed exactly what is going on with this entire performative agenda. You have schools in Louisiana that historically rank at the absolute bottom for education quality, dealing with massive underfunding, and the priority for the state leadership was forcing religious posters into every single classroom. It is completely backwards. It is like putting a flashy new hood ornament on a car that does not even have an engine. The kids need books, they need paid teachers, they need resources, but instead, they get a giant billboard telling them not to covet their neighbor's goods. And then you have Scott Jennings trying to defend it. Scott Jennings said this, but these are the fundamental tenets of Western civilization. That is such a massive cop-out. We all know this is not about teaching historical tenets. If they actually cared about history, they would respect the foundational principles of this country. Think back to Thomas Jefferson in 1802, when he wrote his famous letter to the Danbury Baptists. That is where the phrase wall of separation between church and state actually comes from. The founders were terrified of state-mandated religion because they saw what it did to Europe, but these modern politicians want to completely erase that history to score cheap political points with their base. Then James Carville completely corners him. James Carville said this, but what I find fascinating is the book burners really want the Ten Commandments. That is the exact hypocrisy we are dealing with today. The same exact people who spend their time policing school libraries and trying to ban literature that features diverse voices are the ones demanding mandatory religious text on the walls. They do not want freedom of speech or freedom of ideas. They want total control over what kids are allowed to think, see, and believe. It is entirely about manufacturing a culture war, so people do not look at the actual failing report cards of the state. Next, we are going to watch Abby Phillip interview a Louisiana high school history teacher who refuses to back down against this madness, and it gets even more intense.
My next guest is a high school history teacher in Louisiana who is strongly opposed to this new law. Jacob Newsome joins me now. Jacob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So even though the governor signed this mandate, it's supposed to start in 2025, you say you're not going to comply with it.
No, Abby, I'm not. And if compelled to comply, it will be malicious compliance. I just think it is a foolish thing for us to be doing, regardless of your background, your religiosity or lack thereof. We have issues in the public school system in Louisiana, and I just don't really see how posting the Ten Commandments is going to do anything to solve any of them when we have real issues of staffing, understaffing, lack of resources, students below poverty level, homelessness, and students, and so on and so forth. So I'll focus on my students and what they need to succeed in this world, and I'll leave the cultural wars to somebody else.
Do you think that this is about, scaring teachers with the threat of punishment more than anything else?
I think when you look at this previous legislative session, the bills that didn't get through, and then our current legislative session that just ended and the bills that did get through, there's a clear pattern of intimidation by public officials that are, quite frankly, taking money and support from AstroTurf groups to push a certain view of what America is and what it should be, with things like don't say gay legislation or not discussing gender or sexuality in the classroom outside of the curriculum, where these laws, including the Ten Commandments bill, are purposely vague to create this environment where teachers feel as though there are only very specific things they can talk about, and they might open themselves up to dismissal or lawsuit if they venture outside of these lines that are not clearly defined at all. So yeah, I do think that it's really just an intimidation tactic. I think it's bullying, quite frankly, yes.
Whatever happened to freedom of speech? I mean, I wonder, the Ten Commandments, some people are Christian, and that is a part of their faith. There are plenty of people who are not. Is this an effort to intimidate people of no faith, to push a particular faith on students who are perhaps still developing their sense of self?
I was raised in a Baptist church. I was raised to follow the Ten Commandments, and I think regardless of how you feel about the Ten Commandments, nobody would dismiss the fact that they are a pretty good set of rules.
Oh, absolutely. The moment Jacob Newsome brought the conversation back to reality, it was a breath of fresh air. Jacob Newsome said this: "We have issues in the public school system in Louisiana, and I just do not really see how posting the Ten Commandments is going to do anything to solve any of them." That is the perspective of a real educator who is actually in the trenches every single day. He is looking at classrooms where kids are dealing with homelessness, poverty, and severe understaffing, and the government hands him a poster. It is an absolute slap in the face to the educator trying to keep the system afloat. But it gets even darker when you realize the intent behind it. Jacob Newsome said this: "There is a clear pattern of intimidation by public officials that are, quite frankly, taking money and support from AstroTurf Group to push a certain view of what America is. This is not some grassroots movement of concerned parents. This is a highly coordinated, heavily funded effort by extreme group to completely dismantle the secular public education system. They want teachers to feel scared. They want them looking over their shoulders, terrified that a simple lesson plan might violate some incredibly vague new mandate." Abby Phillip hit the nail on the head. Abby Phillip said this: "Is this an effort to intimidate people of no faith, to push a particular faith on students who are perhaps still developing their sense of self?" The answer is obviously yes. They are targeting a captive audience of children. You have to understand that school is supposed to be a safe, neutral ground where kids from all backgrounds come to learn. When the state endorses one specific religion, it automatically tells every other student who does not follow that faith that they are an outsider in their own community. It is exclusionary by design.
However, it is a clear violation of separation of church and state to enforce this regardless of how you write the bill, to say that it's a historical document or not a historical document, which when I was in the committee was the argument being made. And, also it's pretty telling when the bill author on committee stand says that they don't care about the feelings of a Muslim student or a Hindu student in terms of how they feel about having the Ten Commandments posted, even though that's not their faith.
Wow, what a thing to say in this country where freedom of religion is in the Constitution. That's part of the rules that govern the laws that govern this land. Go ahead, Jacob.
Abby, I wish I was being hyperbolic about that, but I was in the room where it happened. You can even go online and watch the footage from the day of. It's just what the bill author said. And I think that more than the actual posting of the Ten Commandments shows the real intent of this legislation. And also, it's just foolish legislation. I mean, what's going to happen? A third grader is going to walk in a classroom and see "thou shalt not commit adultery" on the wall and say, well, I was really planning on committing adultery today, but since I read that on the wall, now I'm not going to do it. It's just nonsense. We have real issues. And
I hear you. Jacob Newsome, thank you very much for joining me, and best of luck to you in your classroom. Thank you.
This is the absolute mic drop right here. You cannot defend this legislation after hearing this. Jacob Newsome said this: "Many say kniches in sense here H3. Sovet the known." Also, it is pretty telling when the bill author on committee, Stan, says that they do not care about the feelings of a Muslim student or a Hindu student. That tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the Christian nationalist agenda pushing these laws. The mask is completely off. They are proudly admitting on the record that they have zero respect for the First Amendment rights of religious minorities. It is not about morality. reality, it is about supremacy. They want to establish dominance and make sure that anyone who does not fit their exact religious mold knows their place as a second-class citizen in the public sphere. It is genuinely terrifying when you look back at how this unfolded and realize that lawmakers were openly bragging about ignoring the Constitution. The arrogance is just staggering. But at the same time, you have to laugh at how ridiculously incompetent the execution is. Jacob Newsome said this: "A third grader is going to walk in a classroom and see 'Thou shalt not commit adultery' on the wall and say, 'Well, you know, I was really planning on committing adultery today, but since I read that on the wall now, I am not going to do it.' It is just nonsense." That is the perfect teardown. It exposes the sheer absurdity of the entire project. What are 8-year-olds supposed to do with a poster about adultery? It is purely performative theater designed for cable news and campaign ads, not for actual childhood development. Looking back at this whole controversy now, it serves as a massive warning sign. When politicians prioritize ideological warfare over educational funding, the students are the ones who suffer the most. The separation of church and state exists specifically to protect us from this exact type of overreach. We have to demand better for the next generation. They deserve schools that focus on critical thinking instead of state-sponsored religious indoctrination. The fact that a history teacher had to go on national television to explain the First Amendment to lawmakers is deeply embarrassing. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.